Captain Alia Kor stared out the viewport of the Imperium, her flagship, as the galaxy stretched before her. It was supposed to be a routine mission, a show of strength to intimidate the lesser factions that lingered at the edges of the Terran Empire. But as she gazed into the endless expanse, something felt wrong. A tremor of unease gnawed at her gut, a whisper of danger that she couldn't quite place. It had been weeks since the fleet left the safe confines of Terra, and every sensor sweep had reported nothing out of the ordinary. Still, her instincts as a seasoned officer told her to stay alert. The sudden scream of alarms shattered her thoughts. Red lights blared across the bridge, and the voice of her communications officer, Lieutenant Darius, echoed through the room. "Captain, we've just received an incoming transmission. Encrypted, but it's coming from inside the fleet. It's from the Eridani." Alia's heart skipped a beat. The Eridani. The rumors had been circulating for years, whispers of an ancient immortal race that lived beyond the reaches of known space. They were said to be the ultimate predators, eternal and unstoppable. But until now, no one had seen them. No one had known if they were real or simply a story told to scare children. Alia had never believed in fairy tales, but the gravity of Darius' words hit her like a blow. "Patch it through," she ordered. The image on the screen flickered and distorted as the transmission decoded. A figure appeared on the screen, tall and cloaked in shadow. Its features were impossible to distinguish, shrouded in a darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. The voice that came through was chillingly calm, as if the speaker was reciting an inevitability. "Humanity, your time is over." The transmission cut off abruptly, and the bridge fell silent. Alia felt a cold sweat prickle at the back of her neck. She had heard of enemies that could inspire terror with mere words, but this was different. The Eridani had spoken as though they had already won, as if the future had already been written. Before she could issue any commands, a deafening roar tore through the fabric of space itself. A flash of light brighter than 1,000 suns erupted outside, followed by an explosion that rocked the Imperium to its core. The ship's systems went haywire, alarms screaming in a cacophony of chaos. Alia gripped the armrests of her captain's chair, steadying herself as the hull shuddered under the impact. "What the hell was that?" she demanded. Darius' voice was frantic. "Captain, multiple unknown ships are coming out of hyperspace, directly ahead of us. They know. It is enormous. We're being surrounded. Bring up the external sensors," Alia ordered, already on her feet. The holoscreen flickered, revealing the incoming fleet. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Their design was elegant, almost alien in its precision, but it was their sheer size and overwhelming presence that struck fear into the hearts of every officer on the bridge. Dozens of colossal vessels appeared from the void, each one dwarfing the Imperium like a giant towering over a child. Their surfaces shimmered with an eerie energy, a constant pulsating glow that made Alia's skin crawl. A low hum filled the room, as if the very fabric of reality was bending in the presence of these creatures. The Eridani were here, and they were not here to talk. Alia wasted no time. All hands, battle stations, prepare to engage. She was cut off by a violent jolt that threw her against the control panel. A blast of energy slammed into the Imperium, knocking out half of its systems in one devastating strike. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the bridge into darkness. The only sound was the hiss of fire alarms and the frantic voices of her crew. "Status," Alia demanded. "We're losing power in the primary engines, Captain. Shields are at 20%. We can't fight them off with this force." The bridge crew was in disarray, but Alia's mind was already calculating her next move. The Eridani had caught them off guard, but there was still hope. Their ships were enormous, yes, but they weren't invincible. Every battle she had fought had come down to one thing: strategy. Humanity could adapt faster than any enemy. They had to. "Lieutenant, get us to maximum speed. We're engaging evasive maneuvers. We need to buy time for reinforcements. But before Darius could respond, another explosion rocked the ship. This time, the impact was so severe that the entire bridge seemed to shudder and crack. Elia's heart skipped. It was a direct hit to the heart of the Imperium. The hull groaned, and with a violent screech of metal, the ship began to break apart. "We're going down, Captain," Darius screamed. Elia's eyes widened in realization. The Imperium wasn't just under attack, it was being destroyed. The Eridani had no intention of taking prisoners. The lights flickered back to life for a moment, and in that fleeting instant, Alia caught sight of something even more terrifying. One of the Eridani ships had opened its massive docking bay, and through the viewport, she saw figures emerging, tall, sleek, and impossibly calm. They were coming for them. With no time left to think, Alia's hand shot out to the emergency protocol switch. "Prepare for immediate evacuation," she shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Get to the escape pods. Now." The battle for humanity's survival had begun, and Alia knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Alia Corps' escape pod shot through the debris-strewn void of space, the remnants of the Imperium fading into the distance. Inside, the flickering lights and the sharp scent of burning electronics filled the cramped space, but Alia's mind was elsewhere, focused on the task ahead. The screams of her dying ship still echoed in her ears, the sound of a fleet torn apart by an enemy that was far beyond anything humanity had ever faced. Her crew, her people, had been annihilated in an instant. She couldn't allow herself to dwell on that. Not yet. There was no time for grief. The pod jettisoned itself towards a nearby moon, its destination unknown. Inside, Alia steadied herself, scanning the communications panel. The escape pod was a last-ditch effort, and it wasn't designed for long-term survival. Her only hope now was to regroup and find a way to fight back, if there was still time. The pod's thrusters fired, bringing the small vessel toward the rocky surface. It wasn't much, just a barren, desolate moon, but it was far enough from the Eridani's reach for now. Alia's heart raced, and she tried to breathe deeply, shaking off the adrenaline that had clouded her thoughts. Her mission wasn't over. Humanity hadn't been destroyed yet. A soft chime broke her focus. A message had come through from the fleet's remaining command hub. "Captain Kor," said Admiral Corvin, his voice as stoic as always, though there was an edge of fear beneath it. "We've been in contact with several survivor fleets. The Eridani aren't just attacking us. They've struck every human colony within reach. They're methodical, systematic. They're hunting us down." Alia closed her eyes, forcing herself to listen. "How many of us are left?" "Not many," Corvin replied grimly. "Our forces are scattered, and their fleet is overwhelming. We're outmatched, Alia. Their ships regenerate too quickly. They can fight endlessly." Alia clenched her fists. "So we run. We just give up." "No." Corvin's voice softened but hardened at the same time. "But we need to regroup. We need to adapt. Humanity's strength has always been in its ingenuity. But against the Eridani's immortality, we have to do more than just survive. We need to learn, evolve. You've seen what they can do. You've seen them regenerate. We have to find a way to strike at that." Alia felt the weight of those words sink in. It wasn't just about finding a way to win anymore. It was about evolving the very tactics humanity had relied on for millennia. The Eridani weren't just invincible. They had the ability to adapt and regenerate at an impossible rate. But they were also predictable. Overconfidence, arrogance, a belief that no one could stand against them. Those were their weaknesses. "Corvin, we're not going to run. I'll fight. We'll all fight. I'll find a way." The transmission cut off, and Alia was left in the silence of the pod. It wasn't the end, but the beginning. Humanity was fighting a war not just against the Eridani, but against the very nature of immortality itself. Days passed as Alia worked tirelessly in the wreckage of her pod, trying to piece together some form of communication to other survivors. The time alone gave her the clarity she needed, a deep resolve that fueled her every action. She couldn't afford to make mistakes, not when the fate of billions was at stake. Her pod sensors began to flicker, picking up a faint signal. It wasn't much, just a low-frequency pulse, but it was a sign of life. Someone else was out there. Someone who had survived, just like her. She made a decision then, without hesitation. She would join them. There was no time for isolation. Humanity's last chance rested in the hands of the few who could fight back. She had to find them. Alia set the course for the signal source, hoping it wasn't another trap, another false hope like the many others that had been broadcasted in the wake of the Eridani's assault. She couldn't risk trusting easily, not anymore. But humanity had always been at its best when it was backed into a corner, when it had nothing left but its wits and determination. As she powered the pod toward the unknown, Alia's mind returned to the one detail that haunted her, the Eridani, their immortality, their arrogance, the cold way they slaughtered her people. Why had they come? What did they want? She had caught a glimpse of their leader, standing silent and unmoving as the destruction unfolded. But there was something in those eyes, a glimmer of something beyond just conquest, a desperation, perhaps. Were they truly seeking humanity's extinction, or was there more to this war than she understood? The pod's engine hummed steadily as it approached its destination. The harsh, barren landscape of the moon slowly gave way to a distant light, and with it, the hope of a new beginning. But Alia knew that this was only the start. The real battle, against the Eridani, against the very concept of immortality itself, was about to begin. And humanity would adapt, or it would perish. She wasn't going to let it perish. The signal led Alia to an abandoned military outpost hidden within the craters of a nearby planet. It was a relic of humanity's early expansion, its equipment outdated, but its strategic location perfect for hiding from the Eridani onslaught. As she landed the pod on the cracked surface, Alia was greeted by a small group of survivors, scattered remnants of different fleets, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. Among them was Captain Roderick Haynes, a battle-hardened officer whose crew had been the first to make contact with the mysterious signal. "Captain Core," Haynes said, his voice gravelly, "I've heard of you. Your reputation precedes you." Alia gave a grim nod, offering no words of comfort. Instead, she got straight to the point. "We need to know everything. What have you found? What's really going on with the Eridani?" The survivors gathered around her, and one of the younger officers, Lieutenant Mira, stepped forward. "We've been tracking their movements. They don't stop. They move in, destroy, and leave. We thought it was random, but it's not. There's a pattern, a method to their madness." Alia leaned in, her interest piqued. "What are they after?" "That's the thing," Mira said, swallowing hard. "We've been able to get close to one of their downed ships. We intercepted one of their communications, and, well, it's not just about war. It's about something deeper, something personal." Alia's brow furrowed. "Personal?" Haynes exchanged a look with Mira before speaking. "We believe the Eridani are not just trying to wipe us out for the sake of conquest. We've gathered some intelligence suggesting they've been hunting us for millennia, but not just as an enemy. They want something from us, something they can't obtain on their own." "What do you mean?" The survivors didn't hesitate, sharing what they'd pieced together. The Eridani were more than just a ruthless, immortal race. They were an ancient species that had been slowly dying for centuries. Immortality had become their curse, not their gift. They had been alive so long, watching civilizations rise and fall, that they had lost their reason for existence. And in their endless cycle of death and rebirth, they had discovered one truth, the key to escaping their immortality: humanity. Alia's breath caught in her throat. "You're saying they want us to end their immortality?" Haynes nodded. "Exactly. They've been searching for a way to break free from their endless lives. They've tried everything. Science, dark rituals, weapons, but they can't find a way to die. They believe humanity holds the answer. They think our mortality, the way we live, die, and are reborn, is the key. Alia shook her head in disbelief. Why would they think that? Mira stepped forward, her face pale. Because we have something they don't have. The ability to adapt. The Eridani. They regenerate, but they don't evolve. They're stuck in a cycle, reliving the same conflicts over and over. But us? We're unpredictable. We grow. We learn. Elia's mind raced. The Eridani's immortality was both their strength and their weakness. They could survive anything, but it was that very immortality that had made them stagnant. Humanity had always been adaptable, always changing. It was the key to survival, but now it seemed it might be the key to victory. They believe that if they can harness human evolution, they can finally break the cycle of death and rebirth. Haynes continued. They don't just want to kill us. They want to use us. They want to understand what it means to truly live. The revelation hit Alia like a punch to the gut. The Eridani weren't just invaders. They weren't mindless destroyers, as she had thought. They were desperate, desperate enough to destroy entire civilizations in search of something they could never attain, something humanity had by sheer chance. We need to stop them, Alia said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. But to do that, we need to understand their technology. If they've been hunting us for centuries, they must have something, some kind of weapon, some kind of leverage. The survivors nodded in agreement, and together they began to formulate a plan. They had to infiltrate the Eridani's fleet, find their research, and stop whatever experiments they were conducting. But Alia knew it wouldn't be easy. The Eridani had already proven their superiority. Their ships were far more advanced than anything humanity had ever designed, and their ability to regenerate meant they could endure any counterattack. We'll have to take them by surprise, Alia said, pacing back and forth. We need to find a way to use their weaknesses against them. It was then that Mira spoke up, her eyes wide with sudden realization. What if their immortality isn't just biological? What if they've tapped into something beyond their bodies? A quantum field or an energy source they've bound themselves to. Alia's mind raced as the pieces began to fit together. A tether. They're tied to something. If we can sever it, we could break their immortality. The plan was far from simple, but it was the only hope they had. The Eridani might be immortal, but they weren't invincible. Their desperation, their obsession with human mortality, could be their undoing. We strike at the heart of their technology, Alia said. We take down their research, and we end this war once and for all. The survivors stood taller as they listened, their fear replaced with a flicker of hope. Alia knew the risks were enormous. The Eridani were no ordinary foe, but if humanity could tap into their own adaptability, perhaps they could turn the tide. And this time, the fight wouldn't just be for survival. It would be for humanity's place in the universe, and the chance to end the Eridani's eternal nightmare. Alia set the course. The battle for the future of humanity had just begun. The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. Alia and the survivors had spent days preparing, studying everything they could about the Eridani's technology, their fleet, and the possible weaknesses in their immortality. If they were right, and if Mira's theory about the Eridani's tether to an unknown energy source held any merit, they might just have a shot at stopping them. But time was running out. The Eridani were relentless, and every passing moment was another one they were allowing the Eridani to close in. Alia stood in the command center of the outpost. The survivors gathered around her. The mood was somber, but there was a quiet resolve in the air. They had nothing left to lose, and that made them dangerous. We'll have to get close to their flagship, the Eternal Crucible. Alia began, projecting a star map onto the holotable. The massive Eridani ship was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, a dark, looming monstrosity, large enough to swallow entire fleets whole. It was heavily guarded, but it was their target. Somewhere within its vast belly was the answer they needed. We've identified a weak spot in the hull where their energy field seems to stabilize, almost like a power core. If we can disable it, we might sever the connection that keeps them alive. Alia's eyes were sharp, unwavering. But we'll need to get inside, through their security. Captain Haynes stepped forward. I've got a team ready for insertion. We've been training in stealth tactics for months, using cloaking technology. We'll hit them fast, hard, and silent. No one will know we're there until it's too late. Alia nodded. Good. Once we make it to the core, we'll need to disable it, quickly. The clock is ticking. We don't have much time before the rest of their fleet catches on. Mira tapped a console, bringing up schematics of the Eridani vessel. We've also managed to access some of their internal comms. They're suspicious of us now. They know we're out here, and they've already started making adjustments. The closer we get, the more they'll be able to sense us. We'll need to get creative. Alia's mind churned as she absorbed the data. We'll use a diversion. Haynes, take your team and infiltrate the flagship. We'll cause a ruckus from the outside. Get their attention. Keep the pressure on them until you can breach the core. What about the rest of us? One of the engineers asked. We'll hold the line, Alia replied. We'll make sure the Eternal Crucible doesn't get any reinforcements while you're inside. We'll keep them busy until the core is disabled. The survivors exchanged grim nods. They all knew the risks. This wasn't a simple infiltration mission. This was a last-ditch effort to stop the Eridani's endless war on humanity, and it was going to be ugly. Hours later, under the cover of darkness, the Galactic fleet launched their attack. Alia watched as the small assault ships, barely the size of a fighter, darted through the void, cloaked in electromagnetic fields designed to trick the Eridani sensors. Her heart raced as she felt the pull of destiny closing in around them. Everything hinged on this moment. One misstep could mean the end for them all. Approaching the flagship, Haynes reported through the comms, his voice calm and steady. Preparing for insertion. We'll be in position in 10. Alia's fingers gripped the armrest of her chair. Every second felt like an eternity. She watched as the cloaked ships maneuvered around the Eternal Crucible, positioning themselves on its underside, where the ship's shields were weakest. A brief signal from Haynes, and the assault teams began their descent. Outside, the first explosions erupted as the distraction began. Fighters from the remaining human fleet swooped in, launching a barrage of missiles and energy blasts. The Eternal Crucible's defenses flared to life, a chaotic dance of laser fire and plasma shields. It was working. Alia could see the Eridani forces scrambling to respond to the threat. They hadn't expected an assault like this, not with their attention focused on the survivors' movements. Inside the flagship, Haynes' team was moving quickly, silently. They had breached the hull, slipping through tight corridors and avoiding detection with the utmost precision. The ship's interior was cold and sterile, its walls pulsing with a soft, rhythmic energy. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, an eerie mechanical beauty that hinted at a dark purpose. Almost there, Haynes whispered into his comms. Hold tight. Alia watched the battle unfold from her command center, coordinating with the fleet to keep the pressure on. The Eridani ships were starting to regroup, but it wasn't enough. Their ships were powerful, yes, but they were not built for quick maneuvers under pressure. Humanity had one advantage now, unpredictability. But Alia knew it wouldn't last. Once the Eridani realized what was happening, they would fight back with everything they had. She felt the weight of the decision she had made. If they failed here, there would be no coming back. But if they succeeded, the comms crackled, and Haynes' voice came through, low and urgent. We're at the core, planting the charges now. You've got 10 minutes, Captain. Alia's pulse quickened. Copy that. We'll hold them off as long as we can. Outside the flagship, the sounds of battle reached a crescendo. Humanity's last stand had begun. The Eridani were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. The fight for the future of the galaxy had begun, and Alia knew that no matter what happened next, they would either break the Eridani's curse or die trying. The tension inside the eternal crucible was palpable. Haynes and his team crouched in the darkened corridor, hearts pounding as they worked with precision to plant the explosive charges at the core. Every movement had to be calculated. The Eridani were known for their vigilance, and the slightest mistake could mean the end of everything. Haynes glanced at the timer on his wrist. 5 minutes. He could hear the faint hum of the ship's machinery as it powered up, the familiar, eerie rhythm that hummed through every Eridani vessel. There was no turning back now. "We're in position," Haynes whispered to his team. "Start the countdown. Stay sharp. Once the charges are set, we need to move fast." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Ekera, nodded grimly. Understood. The sound of the charges being planted was muffled, but to Haynes, it felt deafening. With every click, the bomb's mechanism was sealed, and their chances of survival diminished. In those few moments, it felt as if the weight of humanity's future rested solely on their shoulders. If they failed, there would be no escape. The entire fleet would be wiped out. Alia and the survivors would fall, just as the rest of humanity had. "We've set them," Ekera reported, her voice tense. 10 seconds. Haynes didn't reply. Instead, he motioned for the team to move. They had to get back to the ship before the Eridani detected them, before their entire mission was compromised. The corridors seemed endless, as though they stretched on forever, designed to trap them in the belly of the beast. The sound of their boots echoed in the silence, as though the ship itself was holding its breath. The comms suddenly crackled to life, and Alia's voice came through, low and urgent. "Haynes, you have 5 minutes. We can't hold off the Eridani much longer. Get out now." Haynes didn't need to be told twice. His team moved faster, adrenaline pushing them past the fear that had been building up for days. They had to make it out, alive, with the charges armed, ready to bring down the heart of the Eridani fleet. Just as they neared the exit hatch, the alarms started blaring. Loud, mechanical wails that shook the very walls around them. The Eridani had detected them. "Go, go, go," Haynes barked. They sprinted toward the small docking bay, but the Eridani were already in motion. The ship's security systems had locked down, and the path ahead was blocked by a group of armored Eridani soldiers. Haynes' heart sank as he realized they were cornered. There was no time for a fight. He had to think, and fast. "Ekera, the bay doors," Haynes said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Can we force them open?" She nodded, her face pale but determined. "It's a manual override. We'll need time." A series of explosions rocked the hallway, and the ground shook violently. The rest of the crew was still holding off the Eridani, buying them precious seconds. Haynes gave them a quick glance, then turned back to Akira. "Do it. Now." With a deep breath, Akira approached the control panel, fingers moving with expert precision over the controls. The tension in the air was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. The Eridani soldiers were closing in, their alien eyes gleaming with malice. "Almost there," Akira muttered, sweat dripping down her face. Suddenly, the doors to the bay screeched open, and the escape pods were visible. Without waiting for any further instructions, Haynes pushed his team forward. The soldiers were nearly upon them, but they were too slow. The pod doors slammed shut behind them, just as the Eridani reached the entrance. "Go. Get us out of here," Haynes shouted to the pilot. The small escape pod shot out from the eternal crucible with the force of 1,000 storms, the violent eruption of energy from the ship's engines propelling them away from the massive flagship. Alia watched on her screens as the escape pod shot into the darkness, a glimmer of hope against the backdrop of the war. The battle outside was reaching its climax. The fleet was holding its ground, but the Eridani were regrouping. They knew something had gone wrong. The eternal crucible was beginning to shift, the ship's massive energy field weakening as the charges inside the core reached their final countdown. Alia's heart skipped a beat as she saw the countdown on her screen. The blast was imminent. "Everyone, brace for impact," she ordered, her voice unwavering as the battle raged around them. Seconds later, the entire flagship erupted in a blinding flash of energy. The shockwave rippled across the void, knocking several of the surrounding Eridani ships off course. The eternal crucible disintegrated in an instant, its massive frame collapsing inward as the core detonated with unimaginable force. A wave of destruction spread outward, tearing apart everything in its path. For a moment, everything was still. Then the comms crackled again, and Haynes' voice came through. "We're alive. But we're not out of the woods yet. We got bigger problems coming our way." Alia's breath caught in her throat, but she held her composure. The first part of their mission was a success. The eternal crucible was gone, but they had only just begun to break the Eridani stranglehold. The true battle, one for the very survival of humanity, was still ahead. And now, Alia knew they had a chance. The void outside was silent for a moment, a stillness that felt almost unnatural. The destruction of the eternal crucible was a momentary victory, but Alia knew it was far from over. The Eridani were relentless, and this war had stretched across centuries. One victory wouldn't break their cycle. Humanity needed to follow through, destroy the heart of the Eridani's power for good. As the escape pods cleared the shockwave from the eternal crucible, Alia turned her attention back to the immediate threat, the Eridani fleet. Their forces had regrouped quickly, already retaliating against humanity's remaining ships. "We're not done yet," Alia muttered to herself. The destruction of the eternal crucible was a blow, but there were still thousands of Eridani ships swarming the battlefield. They had to strike again before the Eridani recovered. A message from Haynes broke her focus. "Alia, we've made it to a safe distance. The eternal crucible is down, but we've got a problem. We were tracking something else, something far worse. The Eridani are starting to retreat, but there's another ship, something we haven't seen before. It's massive, far larger than the crucible." Alia felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The Eridani were retreating? That didn't make sense. They were supposed to be relentless. "Alia, this new ship, it's heading straight for Earth." Alia's eyes widened. Earth. Home. It had always been their sanctuary, the last place where humanity could regroup. But now it was the Eridani's next target. "I need you to get back to the fleet. We're launching a counteroffensive," Alia said, slamming her fist onto the table. Her mind raced, calculating the fastest path to the heart of the enemy's remaining forces. "We need to stop them before they make it to Earth. Haynes, what's your location?" Haynes' voice was heavy with concern. "We're a few parsecs away. It'll take us hours to rejoin the fleet at full speed. The Eridani ship is too fast." Alia's thoughts swirled, but she immediately knew what needed to be done. If the Eridani were attacking Earth directly, the time for cautious tactics was over. They couldn't afford to wait for the rest of the fleet to catch up. She turned to her command crew. "We're going after that ship. Prepare the fleet. We'll engage with everything we have." Alia's voice was firm, and there was no hesitation. "We'll buy Earth enough time to evacuate. If we can't stop them, then we'll force them to turn back. We'll make them regret coming here." The atmosphere inside the command center grew tense. Everyone had seen their fair share of battles, but this was different. Earth was not just another colony or strategic point. It was the birthplace of humanity. Alia could see it in their faces. They all understood the gravity of what was at stake. Meanwhile, Haynes' voice crackled again, but this time there was a sense of urgency. "Alia, you won't believe this, but the new ship, it's alive." Alia's heart skipped a beat. Alive. Yeah, it's not just a ship, Haynes explained. We've intercepted some Eridani comms. They're calling it the Risen One. It's a biomechanical monstrosity, unlike anything we've encountered before. It's huge, larger than any ship we've seen. And it's not just attacking Earth. It's feeding off our fleets, using our own energy against us. Alia ran a hand over her face, trying to process this new development. A living ship. This wasn't just a war anymore. The Eridani had reached a new level of desperation, fusing their technology with organic matter in a final twisted attempt to break their immortality. This ship, Risen One, was more than a vessel. It was a living being. Her voice was grim as she issued orders. Get all our ships into formation. We'll need to hit it with everything we have. Haynes, I need you to intercept and provide us with intelligence. If the Risen One can drain energy from our fleets, we have to be smart about this. A few minutes later, the fleet gathered, a mix of old warships and battered fighters, its remaining strength ready for the assault. The Eridani's new flagship loomed in the distance, massive and terrifying, with tendrils of energy crackling from its surface. It resembled a nightmarish fusion of technology and organic tissue. Metallic ribs running along the edges of its hull, with pulsating veins of glowing energy. It seemed as though the ship was alive, breathing, exhaling in waves of destructive force. Alia knew they couldn't afford to take it head-on. They had to find a way to neutralize it, disable its ability to drain energy, and slow its progress toward Earth. We'll attack its external energy conduits, Alia said, her voice steady despite the storm of fear and adrenaline racing through her body. If we can sever its connection to the energy siphons, we can stop it from feeding. The fleet moved as one, a chaotic dance of gunfire and shields, but Alia could feel the tension in the air. The Risen One didn't just fight back, it fought back. Energy blasts erupted from its surface, hitting several human vessels with pinpoint accuracy, cutting through shields like they were paper. Alia's fingers tightened around the command chair as she watched the onslaught. The Risen One's weaponry wasn't just advanced, it was alive, adapting to every move they made. As a single vessel, it seemed unstoppable, but humanity had a way of winning against the odds. Alia knew they had one final chance, one way to cripple the Eridani ship before it could reach Earth, and she was willing to risk everything to take it. We move now. Prepare for a coordinated strike on the core, Alia ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. A final gambit. Everything would hinge on whether they could hit the Risen One's heart before it was too late. The future of Earth and the galaxy rested on their ability to outsmart a living ship. The Risen One loomed in the distance, its gargantuan form dominating the battlefield. Each pulse of its living energy seemed to reverberate through the fabric of space itself, sending shockwaves through the remaining human fleet. Alia's pulse raced as she looked over the tactical readouts. Every second was a countdown to Earth's potential destruction. But this wasn't just a matter of saving Earth. It was about stopping the Eridani once and for all. We need to hit the core, now, Alia muttered, her voice steady despite the rising tension. The Risen One's defenses were unlike anything they had ever encountered. The ship was alive, constantly adapting to every attack. It was as though it was learning how to anticipate their moves, how to counteract their weapons. We can't keep dodging its blasts like this. Captain Haynes' voice came through, crackling over the comms. Our ships are taking too much damage. Alia looked at the fleet's damage reports. Ships were being torn apart. Fighters exploded in midair, their shields failing against the relentless barrage of the Risen One's energy blasts. The remaining warships weren't much better off, their hulls pocked and scarred from repeated impacts. She had no time to waste. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. Commander, we have one option left, Mira said, her voice low but certain. She had been working furiously at her console, pulling every bit of data from the Eridani communications she could intercept. I've located the Risen One's weak spot. There's a central node beneath the hull, a place where the energy flows are concentrated. If we can breach that node, it'll disrupt the entire ship. Alia's eyes narrowed. You're sure? Positive. Mira replied, tapping her screen. I've been tracking its energy patterns. This node is crucial to the Risen One's life force. Without it, the ship's systems will collapse. Alia's mind whirred as she processed the information. This was their chance. But it wasn't going to be easy. The node was buried deep within the Risen One, protected by layers of defense that would tear through any human vessel foolish enough to get too close. It was a gamble, but it was their only shot. All right, Alia said, taking a deep breath. We'll have to make a coordinated strike. Haynes, get your team ready. We're going in. We'll need to buy you some time, Haynes said grimly. We're already down to less than a third of our remaining fleet, but we'll fight to the last. Alia turned to her crew, who were silently watching her every move. There was no fear in their eyes, just a quiet resolve, a shared understanding that this was the final battle, the one that would decide humanity's fate. Prepare the fleet, Alia said. Haynes, you're going to hit the node with everything you've got. The rest of us will keep the Risen One distracted. No one gets through to you. We've got this, Alia, Haynes said, his voice filled with determination. We'll make it happen. The ships readied themselves for the final assault, fighters launching into the void while the warships formed a defensive perimeter around the vulnerable strike force. Alia's heart pounded as she watched the fleets align, humanity's final line of defense against the Risen One. The Risen One reacted almost instantly, as if it sensed the impending strike. Energy tendrils lashed out from the ship's surface, targeting the incoming human vessels with deadly precision. The first wave of human fighters barely made it past the Eridani defenses, their ships disintegrating in the blink of an eye as the Risen One's living weapons tore them apart. But Alia didn't flinch. This was a fight humanity had to win. She had to trust that Haynes' team would reach the node. Haynes, we're taking fire, one of his team members shouted through the comms. Just stay on target. Don't stop, Haynes shouted back. Alia's fingers gripped the command chair as the battle raged around her. The remaining human ships fired in unison, trying to breach the Risen One's defenses. Every shot sent out a burst of energy that rippled across the ship's hull, but it was clear that they were barely scratching the surface. This ship was different. This was no ordinary weapon. It was alive, and it was fighting back with every ounce of its being. Haynes, how much longer? Alia demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. We're almost there. Just give us a few more minutes. Haynes replied, his voice strained. His team was inside the Risen One, now navigating its living corridors, dodging its defenses as they made their way toward the central node. The ship's very walls seemed to pulse with life, resisting their every move. The moment of truth was closing in. Outside, the battle between the human fleet and the Risen One intensified. It seemed as though the enemy ship could never be defeated, its energy shields flaring with each hit, its weapons retaliating in kind. But Alia knew that every moment they held the Risen One at bay was another step toward victory. Finally, the comms crackled. Haynes' voice came through, almost breathless. We've reached the node, preparing to plant the charge. Do it, Alia said, her voice firm, as she watched the ongoing struggle on her screens. There was a moment of silence. Then, a distant, primal rumble reverberated across the battlefield. A bright light erupted from the center of the Risen One, and Alia felt a surge of hope surge through her chest. The ship's pulse began to flicker, then sputter as the charge detonated. For a heartbeat, the Risen One seemed to hesitate. Then, with a final thunderous roar, it collapsed inward. The pulse of energy from its core died, and the massive ship began to unravel, disintegrating from within. Alia stood at the helm, staring at the fading form of the Risen One, knowing that humanity had survived, this time. But she also knew the war was far from over. The Eridani were down, but their cycle of destruction was far from finished. And they would be back. The Risen One had fallen. Its biomechanical form crumbled into nothingness as the energy it had siphoned from human fleets died with it. The sudden silence that followed the massive explosion was a strange relief, but Alia knew it was fleeting. The battle for humanity's survival had not yet been won. It had only shifted, and the Eridani, though wounded, were not finished. Yet for the first time in a long time, Alia felt a flicker of hope. "Status report," Alia demanded, her voice sharp as she stood at the command chair, staring at the screen showing the aftermath of the battle. "We've lost a lot," Mira replied, her voice heavy with the weight of the losses. "More than half of our fleet is gone, and many of our soldiers won't make it back. But we've crippled the Eridani. Their flagship is no more. The Risen One is destroyed. Their remaining ships are in disarray, and they're retreating. For now, Earth is safe." The words brought no comfort. Earth was safe, but Alia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only a brief respite in an endless war. The Eridani were immortal. They would return, evolve, and try again. Humanity had been at the brink of annihilation too many times to think otherwise. Alia allowed herself a moment of relief, then turned to her crew. "We have to rebuild. Earth's defenses must be reinforced. We're not done yet. We've won a battle, but this war will never end unless we do something more. We have to stop the cycle." Haynes' voice came through over the comms. "Alia, we've got something you need to see." She felt her stomach twist as she called up the transmission. A holographic image appeared before her, showing a deep, swirling rift in space, faintly illuminated by distant stars. The rift pulsed with an eerie energy. Alia recognized it immediately, a dimensional tear. "I'm sending you the coordinates now," Haynes said, his voice serious. "It's the Eridani's ultimate weapon, a rift to another dimension, where they've been feeding on the essence of entire galaxies. The Risen One was just a small part of their grand plan. If we don't close this rift, they'll continue to pull resources from other dimensions to fuel their immortality. It's how they've survived for millennia." Alia's blood ran cold. She knew that if the rift was left open, humanity's survival would be at risk. Forever, the Eridani would have access to infinite resources, and the war would never end. The universe itself could collapse under their relentless hunger. "Is the rift stable?" Alia asked. "It's unstable," Haynes replied, "but not for long. If we don't act quickly, it will solidify, and the Eridani will be able to harness its power permanently. We can't afford to wait for backup or more reinforcements. It's up to us." Alia stared at the rift, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on her. If she sent everything they had into that rift, it would be humanity's final gamble. There was no telling what they would find on the other side, but there was no choice. The Eridani had to be stopped, completely. "Set course for the rift," Alia said, her voice firm, unwavering. "All ships, prepare for final engagement. This is our last chance to end this once and for all." The fleet moved into position, their ships battered and scarred, but their resolve stronger than ever. This would be their last stand. The coordinates Haynes had transmitted led them into the heart of the rift, into the unknown, but there was no turning back now. As they approached, the very fabric of space seemed to warp and twist. The rift was alive, stretching and bending reality as they neared. The air grew heavier, as though something ancient was waiting on the other side. It was as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Alia gave one last order to her fleet. "Hold steady. Trust in each other. And remember, we fight not just for Earth, but for every world the Eridani have destroyed. This ends today." The human fleet powered forward into the rift, its ships moving as one, their weapons primed and ready. Inside, the rift was a chaotic storm of energy and light. It felt like an entirely different realm, one beyond the laws of space and time. The ship's sensors flickered wildly, trying to adjust to the strange, unnatural atmosphere. Then the Risen One's energy signature appeared again, massive, seemingly infinite, pulsating with dark power. The Eridani had followed them into the rift. "We're not alone," Mira said, her voice tense. "They're coming for us." Alia didn't hesitate. "All ships, engage the Eridani forces. We finish this here and now." The battle was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The Eridani were everywhere, shadows in the storm, their ships flickering in and out of reality, their weapons tearing through human ships like they were made of paper. The very rift itself seemed to fight against them, energy waves crashing like storms as the two forces clashed in a furious final showdown. But humanity was ready. Every last ship, every last fighter, was committed. The Risen One reappeared, its massive form dominating the battlefield. Alia's heart raced, knowing that this was it, the moment to end the war. With a final, desperate push, Haynes led the charge, targeting the heart of the Eridani ship. As the last of their energy reserves were spent, the Risen One exploded, sending a wave of energy so powerful that it collapsed the rift. The void itself seemed to heal, space and time returning to normal. Alia watched as the remnants of the rift faded into nothingness. The battle was over. The Eridani were defeated. Finally, utterly defeated. The universe, for the first time in millennia, was at peace. But Alia knew that peace would always be fleeting. Humanity had endured because of their will to survive, their unity, and their indomitable spirit. The war would never truly be over, not as long as there were threats to fight. But in this moment, at the very edge of existence, humanity had triumphed. And as the survivors looked toward the stars, they knew one thing for certain: humanity would never give up. The war might end, but the fight for their future would never stop.